quick ways to bring your nervous system down to a state of more parasympathetic activation, you're no longer spending out dopamine and acetylcholine at the same rate.
Do you have any information about anything in particular you can do to get stronger? Because we've talked about the central nervous system. We touched upon it a little bit, and I figured who better to ask than somebody like yourself. I mean, if you're saying the eyes are kind of an extension of the central nervous system and of the brain, is there things we can do with our eyes that would maybe perhaps enhance performance in a sport or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is really getting out into the the outer margins of the stuff that I'm doing these days, and so I'm happy to talk about it. I just want to highlight it as speculative / work in progress. So this is interesting. There's some practices that have been used mainly in Eastern countries. About using, so the visual system and the vestibular system, we know this as FAC, are very tightly linked. So it works like this. So this is pitch, yaw, and roll for the pilots out there. They recognize that. Pitch, yaw, and roll. When you move your head or you walk through space, things are moving around on your retina, but you don't experience them as blurry like you would if you took a picture on your phone and moved your phone. You experience them as stationary, because when you move your head like this or like this or like this, there's signals that are sent to your balance system of your inner ears. You've got little stones that either roll forward, roll like this, or roll like this, believe it or not. And those are registering. You've got like a little gyroscope in your inner ear, and it's linked to your eyes, so that every time I move my head, like immediately the visual image is stationary. I see it as crisp, because it's literally making a little tiny eye movement. It's forcing an involuntary eye movement that's making sure that the visual image is stationary. Now, why is this relevant? Well, once you start to understand the visual system and the balance system are linked, there are these interesting portals through which they interact. And one of the ones that people in the strength community and sprinting community have used is to, before they'll do an exercise where they want to increase range of motion, this is not strength, they'll stand stationary and they'll literally move their eyes to the corners of their periphery, up, down, far corners of their periphery, extending their visual gaze. That sends signals to the vestibular system, which sends signals to the cerebellum, which is where your motor programs are memorized. So when you reach down to grab a bar to deadlift, that's a motor program that's not stored in your hippocampus. That's stored in your cerebellum, your motor programs. And what they figured out is that range of motion is greater after they do these really extended eye movements. Why? Because the cerebellum communicates with the spindles in the muscles and connective tissues and joints that allows joints to move further in space, because of you are looking further in visual space.
What's up, Power Project family? It's time to stop dressing like you're a fucking preschooler and step your game up by checking out Vuori clothing. Now, I'm not one to talk. I wear a fucking pink hat that has a dog on it, but at the end of the day, at least my shirt and shorts are popping. So head to Vuori because they have great stuff for your top and your bottom. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, you guys got to head over to vuori.com/powerproject. That's VUORI.com/power project, and you guys will automatically receive 20% off your order. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. Let's get back to the podcast.
If you're cramming your vision into a little box like this, your range of motion and your ability to recruit muscle fibers is more restricted too. It sounds crazy, but it's a real thing. So one could imagine playing with this, hitting threshold in a lift and then expanding gaze if the limitation is based on an inability to recruit musculature that is involved in range of motion. Now, I think failure at a particular point in a set is unlikely to be a range of motion issue. It's probably going to be a motor unit recruitment issue. So how can you recruit more motor units and do this through strength? It's probably going to be the opposite. It's going to be by bringing that visual focus in more narrow. Now, I love digging through ancient literature and kind of pulling out practices that then we can put some modern science to. There is this idea, that the myth of the Cyclops, like one eye, like,
Right.
in the middle of its head. The Cyclops, one of the elements of the myth of the Cyclops is that with that unitary focus and one eye, that there was enormous strength, inability to see possibility, but enormous strength. I would love to see a study where vision was actually restricted to a more narrow point and looking at lift efficiency or recruitment of motor units. I have not seen that study. Maybe we should tee up that study at some point. But you hit on it exactly, Mark. When you think about that the eyes are a guidance system for the rest of the brain to drive focus and tap into these neuromodulators like acetylcholine and dopamine and norepinephrine, then it doesn't seem so crazy that you would use vision as a portal to manipulate the rest of the nervous system. And of course, deliberate lifts are the reflection of nervous system engagement. So I think there's room for exploration there. Maybe you guys would want to run some experiments. We could do some fun ones with VR, because in VR, I can slap the goggles on you and I can have you still see what you're doing, and I can dilate or change your gaze in real time, and I control it, right? Or we control it. So that might be a fun experiment that we could do. And I do talk to the folks over at Stanford Athletics. That might be a fun little platform to set up, because if you think about narrowing your focus, but then it kind of snaps wide, that's different than if I'm controlling it experimentally. That's the utility of science. So I would encourage not just getting that kind of, people call eye of the tiger, whatever. I think eye of the Cyclops, like really narrowing in that gaze and going. But as you hit, like, I would love to see, for instance, dilation of gaze, focus of gaze, dilation of gaze, focus of gaze while moving through the set. That might be interesting too. And I think ultimately, when you look at recovery, I think this is slightly separate, but I think of recovery as beginning the second that you end that set for the next set, obviously. And physiological size, dilation of gaze are going to be quick ways to bring your nervous system down to a state of more parasympathetic activation. You're no longer spending out dopamine and acetylcholine at the same rate. So I don't know. You guys are the experts in this. I would love to get feedback if you start to play with this at all. I can say personally, my last rep of every set is a physiological sigh. I set down the weight, and then I do that because I'm trying to teach. I use the weight room as a platform to teach my nervous system how to go through these oscillations deliberately. I don't want to just be a slave to whatever reflexive breathing I've got going. Anyway, I'm speculating there, and but if you end up maybe soon you'll be going in the gym with blinders on, like a horse. But who knows?
What about colors? Anything with colors?
Hey, baby. I'm joking. Guys, like, comment, subscribe, and head to the Power Project Discord, all right? I know you enjoyed the video. Speak to y'all soon.